Welcome to Sexually Charged Radio. I'm your co-host, Ruthie. I'm here with my regular co-host,
Thomas,
and our wonderful guest co-host,
Bowen.
And we are super excited to be talking about non-binary and gender pronouns and stuff like that. And before we dive into that, we should introduce ourselves a little bit and come up with a question. I have been thinking of a lot of questions about like childhood stuff, which totally proves that I teach family therapists and work in the field of mental health. My name is Ruthie. My pronouns are they and their. I identify as non-binary genderqueer and also sexually queer and non-monogamous, and I'm white, and I work in academia, and I'm first generation Canadian, and probably the only because I don't have kids. So what question do you want to ask me, Thomas?
Oh, finally. It's been a while since I've gotten a chance to come up with a question.
I'm controlling sometimes, sorry.
It's all right. That's our dynamic, and we're okay with that.
It's consensual.
I'm going to say, if there was one piece of advice around sexuality, relationships, gender, all of the topics we cover, that you could, like, put on a banner to hang from like the CN Tower for everyone to see, what would it be?
Be kind. That would be it. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. Being kind is a radical political act in this way, to be loving of yourself and wherever you are, and wherever you are with your sex, your gender, your sexuality. To be accepting and kind to yourself is a radical pushback against all of this stigma that's out there, and then to be extending that to others. And that doesn't mean you have to be the same as them or understand them or anything like that, but just an ethic of kindness. Am I being good Canadian with this? Is that good Canadian answer?
Very Canadian. Okay. I thought it was going to take you more time to think of something, so I'm a little disappointed in myself for not getting a stump on you there.
I mean, probably I get a better one if I thought longer, but I feel pretty good about that because it's deeper than it sounds.
It's very deep.
Like how do we be kind about how we like our bodies and all sorts of things like that. That's big. Do you want to introduce yourself and answer the same question?
Yeah, sure. How do I answer that question after you give this like beautiful thing? I'd be like,
just be guttural. Be guttural about it.
It's gonna be like penises are fun.
I think that I would like to see that hanging from the CN Tower for sure.
So my name's Thomas. I'm a PhD candidate in industrial and organizational psychology. I focus on creating more diverse and inclusive workplaces and educational settings. And I identify as both gay and queer, and we've been doing this show for quite a long time now.
Since late 2015.
And I think I have lost anything new to be able to share with the audience at this point.
What color socks are you wearing today?
I have no socks on.
That's new.
Yeah.
Well, not for you, but to share. I've never asked you that on air before.
I know. I'm wearing Birkenstocks because it's Guelph.
I'm so proud of you for not wearing socks with your Birks. Thank you.
Yeah. And in terms of the banner that I would hang, I think I will stick with my penises are fun.
Can I draw vulvas all over your banner at 3 a.m? Will that upset you?
No, absolutely. I think it should be a background of vulvas. And on the flip side, where penises is fun, is vulvas are fun. And then we have it on a rotating one. All body parts are fun.
Yes. So this is going to be almost like a cube of different body parts and things instead of a banner.
Yeah, it is.
This has become a big piece of public art. I like it. I think it'll be a tourist attraction.
It should be.
Yeah, good idea, Thomas. Let's get a grant for that. Bowen.
All right, so my name is Bowen. I am a second-year biomedical student here at the University of Guelph. And if I could put... Sorry, what was the question again? I forgot.
If you could put a message on a banner that hangs from the CN Tower, and it could have to do with relationships or gender, sexuality, sex, life, intimacy, anything like that, what would your message be?
Well, I guess my message would be, I am single and ready to mingle.
Awesome! I love it. Would you put like a picture of yourself there?
If I get to pick which picture gets to go on, then yes, because I have a really good picture
totally.
right
This
now.
is your banner.
Then yes, Then yes, I will put it.
Would you have like a Twitter handle on this, or how would you? Or people just have to find you? They just have to want you so much they find you.
Well, they would just have to check. Well, I guess I'll put my Facebook link or Facebook
Okay.
on there. So
Do you want to share that with people?
I'm all right. Thank you. I'm all right. Thank you. I'm not looking for anything so far. But
Oh, okay. I see. This is just theoretical.
Just theoretical, yes.
Okay.
I am single and ready to make them.
All right. Excellent. Well, congratulations on your minglehood. It sounds bad, but it's not.
And you just
It's close. Okay. I don't know how to redeem myself, so moving on. So the topic we wanted to talk about had to do with defining non-binary and, kind of where to take this conversation in educational and workplace locations. And Bowen, you kind of came up with a question because of this thing that happened in the news, which I think we can recap briefly, but try not to over-focus on the guy because I hate him.
Okay, well, I think it was last summer, and I was just scrolling through Facebook like a average university kid during summer break, having nothing to do, well, having lots to do, but having no self-control, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I came across this article, and it was talking about a controversy regarding the UFT prof. Ruthie, would you like to take over?
I could. I was just reading an article about him. So basically it says here, this is a CBC article on cbc.ca. University of Toronto psychology prof released a video online criticizing political correctness on campus. He also said he doesn't recognize a person's right to be addressed using genderless pronouns like they instead of he or she. And this is particularly controversial because I actually don't know how this bill turned out. I should know this. Under the proposed federal law bill here in Canada, in Ontario, C-16, it will become illegal to discriminate on the basis of gender identity or expression. And so there might be implications for that of having to use the pronouns that people have determined for themselves instead of what we might determine for other people if there is a conflict and we're made aware of that. And he's saying that he's not a bigot and that no other people don't get to determine the words he uses for them, and that he feels like he should use the words that best represent the facts as he sees them, and that it's not up to other people to change that, and that the notion of non-binariness and potentially even transness has not been proven, like the notion of gender beyond I guess certain biological markers is not something we should legislate yet because we're not there far enough. But he also repeats that he's not against trans people. But I'm not convinced he's for them either. But that's not addressed in here. So I think, though, to broaden it out from him to say that I think that perspective represents the thoughts of a lot of people. And that non-binary stuff is newer. And I think I'm the only non-binary person at the table right now, yeah? Cool, so, yes? Okay. So we'll just have that out there as part of their conversation as well, too. So, yeah, what questions or thoughts are, like, roaming around in your head with this? And Bowen, you brought up the topic, so I'd love to hear from you and what interests you about this.
Right, so I guess my first question is, what is non-binary?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so could you please answer that first?
Sure. So the way that I would answer that is we now tend to think of gender, many people now think of gender as an intuitive sense of who you are. So you kind of like sort of know what team you're on or not on in your gut or in your heart. And it's maybe like a sense of belonging or a sense of similarity or something like that. So many people feel very comfortable with different types of femininity or womanhood or femaleness or whatever the case may be. And there's a comfort in that for them. And they kind of like, not that all women are the same by any means, but they sort of feel like they got their group within there pretty well and similarities and whatnot. And other people are the same around masculinity or malehood or manliness or whatever it is. Like, sure, all men are different. Maybe you're a softer, gentler guy or a rougher guy or whatever the case may be. But within there, like, there's this intuitive sense of belonging and identity. And then there's plenty of people out there who don't feel that way. And it may be that they're still keeping with the term man or woman that might have been the expectation assigned at birth. So if you're born with a penis, people are going to assume you're a boy or a man. If you're born with a vulva, people are going to assume you're a girl, you're a woman. So it might be that they're still keeping that guy-gal label, but they feel a little bit more masculine or a little bit more feminine than would be expected there. And then there's people who are like, actually, I'm so much towards the middle that I don't really feel a sense of belonging on one side or the other. I may feel some masculinity and some femininity, both. It might be more one day, more the next, or it might be an absence of either. Some people don't feel any sense of gender. Usually that's agender. So binary, like bicycle, means two, right? So binary, meaning the two ends of the spectrum, man, woman. So if you're non-binary, you don't fit with either extreme. People don't often think of male or female as extreme. They think of it as normal. But in this case, if we're looking at a line and let's say we put man on one end and woman on the other, those would be the extreme ends. So you're somewhere in that like middle third, right? And so your intuitive sense of self is not in alignment with either of those two things, or is not consistently in alignment with that. And like you just sort of know. So for people who are cisgender, meaning that they identify as the same gender as the sex that they were assigned at birth, so assigned male at birth, they have a penis, they still identify as a guy, cisgender. Cis is Latin for same as. So for people who are cis, they don't really get it because there's this, they just sort of belong with their wording most of the time, and they may have conflicts where they're like, oh, I don't like this kind of guy, or I don't like this kind of woman, or whatever. I'm kind of more this kind of guy or this kind of woman, but they still feel like they belong in it. So it's a very foreign idea to feel like you don't belong within the gender that people are using the words for you, but you just know it, and it's not easier. It's not you don't get any special benefits for it. There's no way in which it improves one's quality of life by some sort of benefits or artificiality. It's not trendy or cool. Like people are talk about it more, but at no time in my life have I ever felt trendy or cool for this, and I don't think I ever will.
Trendy and cool for other reasons.
Thanks, totally, but not this one. Yeah,
I mean, it's part of what makes you trendy and cool as like an awesome person,
as a unique individual. But it is when you choose when you choose to ask other people to recognize you as not cis, so trans or non-binary. You don't do it because you want to, you do it because you have to. Because all of the crap that's going to be thrown on you when you come out like that is not as bad as how awful it feels to not come out. That was a very long answer to a short question. So maybe the too long didn't read would be non-binary people are those who do not identify as solely male or solely female, but they're somewhere in that middle space, not on either binary, either end of the binary. What do you think of that, Thomas?
I mean, I thought that was very well developed, well explained. I'm sure you.
I get asked. Yeah.
But it is a complicated understanding because when we're raised through the education systems that we have, non-binary never appeared in any textbook, in any lecture, in any class discussion, and so for a lot of us growing up, this wasn't a term that we ever were familiar with or had people in our lives who identified that way or saw it on television. Mm-hmm. So I think it's, if this is the first time you're hearing the term as a listener, if this is the 100th time you've heard this term as a listener, but still just don't feel completely sure that you understand it, it takes time. I think there's a lot of good resources out there that you can educate yourself around the term. And I would just add that if you have somebody in your life who's non-binary identifying, please don't just expect that they are going to educate you about the topic. Do try to educate yourself in the process as well.
Yeah. So Thomas, how tall are you?
On a good day, I'm 6'4".
Okay, 6'4". So it would be like if I interacted with you all the time and I just kept saying, it must be handy to be short because you can reach stuff on the lower level all the time. And I love that you never hit your head on anything because like being short has so many advantages. And so I constantly just kept getting this thing wrong about you that you clearly know about yourself, and who would know it better than you? Now visually I should be able to see it, so that does make it different than non-binary in many ways. But it's just getting that thing wrong. And inside you're like, but no, that's not my lived experience of who I am. And I could say that to you all day, and it might not functionally matter to you, but I'm getting something wrong about you all the time. So it's sort of like that, I think is the best example I can come up with. Some people use examples of just chronically calling someone the wrong name or something like that. But a lot of people aren't that super attached to their name. But something where you innately are like, actually that fact is not right, and people will just keep doing it anyway.
Yeah, so sometimes you think about it if if you're called the wrong profession, if you're a person living with an invisible disability, and that's something that's not acknowledged for you out, in the world. Someone doesn't accept that or doesn't recognize or maintain that knowledge. Certain ethnicities. So my advisor is from the Canary Islands, and she tells the story all the time, so I'm not, breaking any sort of confidentiality here. Individuals will mistake her as Persian or as Latina or as Arab descent, and it's that sense of, well, yeah, she doesn't look white, but people are getting this wrong part of her, this wrong ethnicity identifier.
They've decided what she is without asking, and they have placed that on her without her consent, and it is exhausting probably for her to correct that, or she may decide not to deal with correcting that. Even if it doesn't necessarily make a difference in her day, it makes a difference because of who she is, right? So if somebody guesses the wrong ethnicity about her, like, it may not change her job or anything she does that day, but she is not respected for who she is that day.
And here at Sexually Charged Radio, we strive to respect everyone. And by listening to Sexually Charged Radio at 93.3 FM or at cfru.ca or on YouTube by searching Sexually Charged Radio, hopefully you're also engaging in different ways to learn how to respect other individuals across the gender and sexuality and life spectrums that we engage in. And if you have some awesome questions or interesting questions or things that are just stuck in mind that you'd like us to answer or address on our show, you can write those in to
Ask SC, the initials for Sexually Charged, at uoguelph, uoguelph.ca, where the fantastic student interns over at Student Wellness will receive those questions, forward send them on to us. They help with the editing. Well, they don't just help. They do the editing and all the posting and all that stuff. And we're super excited and appreciative to have that relationship. Bowen, so that was a lot of words in response to a short question. Like, what comes to mind after hearing all that?
Well, I've got to say that I can definitely see the challenges of identifying with non-binary genders, as there always will be. When someone doesn't really recognize you for who you believe you are, that can definitely be tough on you as a person and on you as a person who's trying to build an identity in society. So I definitely see the struggles. I see how much work someone would have to put in to really define who they are, and it's not so much of a privilege as it is more of a burden to bear. Yeah, so that's my initial reactions. I need a bit more time to process everything, of course, because that's a lot of information.
Well, I think there's kind of this reputation of people being like a snowflake, like they want to be special and get a special privilege by getting a special pronoun, things like that. And for me, one of my responses to that is like, no, actually just trying even playing fields. Most people, the vast majority of people, would prefer that an accurate pronoun be used for them. It's just that statistically speaking, that's largely been male or female, he or she, for people. So it is actually just trying to do the same thing there and to not have an incorrect one used. And I'm sorry if that takes some effort to relearn and to expand, but like as humans, we're learning new things all the time. Isn't that great that we are constantly learning and growing and expanding and learning new words? And also in oldie days, they was a singular pronoun, so it had fallen out of commonplace usage. Although you might say, oh, I went to the grocery store and they totally ma'amed me and I felt very old that day. I just used the word they in that sentence, but it doesn't jump out at all. We've done that before. Yeah. So I don't know. What do you think are some of the other? Well, do you have a response or other kind of other stereotypes or questions that people have?
Yeah. Well, I will just echo. I mean, they as a pronoun is often used in reference of the singular around organizations and institutions. So we use it all the time. The English language is evolving constantly and evolving in different ways.
The word barf is in the dictionary now. I think that's an improvement. Like, language evolves.
Muggle is in the dictionary, as it should be. I mean, Harry Potter is fantastic.
Yeah. Bowen's making faces like, what has happened to the dictionary?
But But the English language changes, and we have to change with it. And so I presented this poster at the Canadian Psychological Association the other day about how we can create more inclusive university websites. And we had lots and lots of individuals come up to our poster and talk about their experiences and what they would like to see done. And one of the common things that they were talking about is, well, universities are meant to be that place where knowledge is discussed and complicated ideas are challenged and brought in, but also it's meant to be a learning environment. And a lot of learning can't happen if an individual is spending that time having to do the emotional labor of, being the recipient of hate or disrespect. So as an institution, whether it's a university, a workplace, a hospital, wherever, we're putting more work on individuals for them to have to accept this disrespect and then correct others' behaviors, that if we as a society really strove to be inclusive, we would make it easier for everyone. And then everyone could engage more fully in the classroom, in their workplace.
Well, it's not just not treating people like crap. It's that you can't be yourself where you don't see yourself without having to put in a lot of extra work. So if you're the first person in your family to get X degree or enter some sort of field that has kind of a sociocultural, like a class associated with it, like if you come from a family of manual laborers and you're going to have a fancy pants air conditioned office job, like that could be something like that too, right? Or, if you don't see your gender represented, or you don't see your sexuality represented, you don't see your ethnicity represented, it's not that you can't do it, it's that it's a lot harder. People will respond and react to you differently, and you're blazing the trail, right? And it's going to be a harder trail to blaze, because blazing a trail is difficult work. You got to take down the trees, you got to figure out the plan, you got to lay the path. Other people walking down this freaking path that's like got a moving walkway on it already for them, So yeah, it's also a matter of just seeing yourself represented and knowing it's an option. I used to work with really, really low-income middle school students in Indianapolis as part of AmeriCorps, which is the domestic version of Peace Corps in the U.S. And if you ask kids what they wanted to be when they grew up, some of the kids, like nobody ever said they wanted to be an astronaut or a political leader or any of these big like dreaming things that kids have, even like a firefighter or something. They never came up with that. They came up with things like, I want to work at the Family Dollar, which is an inexpensive retail store that probably pays minimum wage, is my guess. So, and that was like a big thing, because that would be a recognized position with some respect, where you're helping people and things like that. And that was also where they saw themselves. Some people in the community who had made it and been successful worked at Family Dollar, right? And they did not see people that they felt they had anything in common with being firefighters or being political leaders or being astronauts. And it doesn't mean that they're incapable or not good enough. It just means that they're not even going to think about it, right? I don't know. What do you think about all this, Phone?
It's really interesting. And it really shows how much of an impact environments can have on your development, especially during adolescence and during early childhood. But yeah, some of these things, I guess, which we don't, like, some of the struggles that we don't have to face doesn't really come across our minds, and as a result, we just don't quite think of it, because it's like if you don't have to do something, why would you put the brain and willpower to thinking about it or even trying to change it? Because if you're born into a world that's suited your needs, then you don't really have to look across and think about what about the other person, right? You only think about yourself, and that's my first initial thought. Yeah, Ruthie.
So, I mean, that sounds like a great definition of privilege, right? Like you have certain privileges, but you're not aware because you have them. It feels normal. And so why would you think about not having them? Like why would that even come to mind until you're confronted with that sort of situation? It doesn't make you a bad person. Like, having privilege doesn't make you a bad person. Misusing your privilege and not seeking to just grow and aspire and have a better understanding of different people, that might move you towards being a bad person. But it's not because you're innately bad because you have certain privileges. It just means that like try hard not to be a jerk, and like if somebody brings something up to you, strive to broaden your understanding, or maybe you don't even have to understand. You can just believe the other person. I mean, think critically and stuff. I mean, there's always some one-off people out there, but yeah, to seek to broaden, but it doesn't make you bad to have privileges.
Yeah, and I think, especially going back to the example, the news story and the faculty member at U of T. Is it really going to make your life that much more difficult to start using pronouns for your students? Is it really going to make your life that hard and difficult? Because if it is, maybe you shouldn't be in this job. Maybe you shouldn't be educating.
Defending an ideological position. And didn't you start the question at the beginning about what would the message be? Was that this episode? What would the message be from the CN Tower? Was that this episode?
This was.
So be kind. Just it's not. It's you're gonna be okay, dude. You're gonna stay employed. It's gonna be fine. To offer another person a kindness that does no harm to you, just because it causes you to hold two things in balance. Philosophically, I stand here, but I recognize that this person has alerted me that the kindest option is this. Why wouldn't you? I don't get it.
Well, I think this has been a really wonderful conversation. And really enlightening. I've learned some new things here, and hopefully listeners, you have too. So right before we wrap up and end this episode, any last thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I just want to say that I've definitely learned a lot, and it definitely changed my view and what I'm going to think about and reflect every night before I go to sleep, because I do believe that even though we might not realize that some of us are privileged, and unless we see someone who's not, we don't tend to realize what privileges we have and how we should use that.
Very cool. I couldn't think of a better note than that to end on. Thank you so much, Bowen and Thomas, for joining me. And
thank you, Ruthie, for all of your thoughts and educating of us.
Happy to be your token non-binary. And thank you for listening to Sexually Charged Radio on CFRU. You can find us at cfru.ca or 93.3 FM if you happen to be in Guelph, or on YouTube by looking up Sexually Charged. And we will see you around for a future episode.